I'm Nadia Manzoor, and I'm a Pakistani Muslim who grew up in England. I learned how to read Arabic when I was 7 years old. I believe in the power of submission, and I love the sound of azan, the Islamic call to prayer. I'm Nadia Manzoor, and I'm a feminist storyteller. I was born in Chicago, and I now live in Brooklyn with my hot Haitian husband. And no, I didn't change my name after I got married, and I love bacon. If you had to take a guess, which one of these statements about myself is true? The first or the second? Maybe you're not sure. Maybe my list of identifying traits seem contradictory. Muslim, feminist, who loves bacon. But what if I told you they are both true? Every single thing I said is true. And I'm at peace with that now, but I spent most of my life being deeply conflicted when faced with that ultimate question, who am I? What I'm going to share with you today is about the story of identity and how I went from a liar to a truth teller, and how by sharing my story publicly, I discovered who I am. So one of the things I remember telling Abu, my father, when I was 5, was that I wanted to become an astronaut. And he told me, "Beta,
How can you be astronaut? Women can't be astronauts.
who will cook? Who will clean? Who will feed your husband if you are floating about in space?" My father taught me that in order to be a good Muslim woman, my inherent function was in being a wife and a mother, and nothing else. I wasn't allowed to show the contours of my body, nor of my mind. And the one thing that was outlawed from existence was my vagina. Or as my mother would say, "Beta, we don't say that word. We say shim shim." I was taught that the Western world was a dangerous place, where white women drank beer for breakfast, ran about with exposed breasts, and had babies out of wedlock. Apparently, the more Western I became, the more corrupted and endangered my soul. But to me, the West seemed magical. I had visions of yellow-haired pixies prancing about, drinking tea from dainty china cups and eating tiny cucumber sandwiches. My white best friend told me stories of her romantic escapades that only furthered my intrigue at this forbidden existence. So we were sitting on the park bench, and I got touched up in 2 places. What? Where? Yeah, but the park bench and where? Oh, not 2 places. Both places. My God, Nod, are you going to be a virgin your whole life? No, it's just, I can't do sex before I get married. It's my religion. Ew, that's so barbaric. So on one side was this conservative Muslim worldview, which like a burqa wanted me to conceal myself. And on the other side was the Western liberal worldview, which like a bikini valued the exposure of self, thought, and sex. I was like a cultural yo-yo bouncing back and forth between these 2 diametrically opposing worldviews. And in order to hold all of these seeming contradictions, I started to lie. I lied about everything. When I was 7, I told my English teacher that Pakistanis went to Hollywood for their religious pilgrimage. And then when I was 15, I told my cousins in Pakistan that I had a boyfriend, when in fact I wasn't allowed to even talk to boys. And then when I was 18 and I finally decided to go on a secret date, I told my parents that I was staying late after school for a debate. Raise your hands if you've ever lied to a family member or a friend because you were too afraid to admit something about yourself. Everyone. Raise your hand if you've ever been one person at home and then another person in your workplace. A lot of people. Raise your hand if you've ever been so afraid that if your family or community found out about your secrets, that their perceptions of you would be forever altered for the worse, and that you would be abandoned. Yeah, that's how I felt. I lied because I was uncomfortable with certain people learning about certain parts of myself, because I was uncomfortable with certain parts of myself. On one hand, I was afraid of being rejected by my white friends as being uncool and coming from a strict and unaccepting culture. But on the other hand, I was afraid of dishonoring my family name and in being disowned. But lying made me weak. I was so busy trying to please everybody else around me that I didn't have the time and the space to understand my own needs. And I started lying to myself. My moral compass, my inner navigational system was broken. And I started to make some really poor life decisions. I lied to my family when I was anorexic and addicted to amphetamines. And then I lied about where the bruises came from on my face and on my arms when things became unhealthy with my boyfriend. I was weak, and I was seriously stuck. But you know what liberated me? It was this. It's what I'm doing right now. It's sharing my story publicly. No lies, no separate versions of myself, just my story. And it didn't happen overnight. There were stages to this transformation. The first was the outpouring of my creative floodgates. So after my face-off with physical abuse and addiction, all of the stories of everything that I had been hiding were just bursting out of me. So instead of attending NA meetings, which I probably should have, I joined a writing group. And now I had to share what had been my very personal journal entries to complete strangers. And what happened was amazing. They just listened. They didn't judge me because I had lied to my family and friends for all these years. They didn't judge me that I had abandoned my culture when things had become too rough. Being able to share my story without judgment was profound. And it gave me the confidence to keep writing and to keep sharing and to keep discovering who I am. The second stage is cultivating creative kick-ass partnerships. I did it mostly with women because, let's face it, women are killing it right now. My writing group, mostly women, was so amazed by my story because I introduced them to a culture that they knew very little about. And they became invested in helping me develop the craft of storytelling. And as a result, I met a theater director and then a stage manager and a lighting designer and a production manager. And now all of a sudden, all of these incredible creative women became committed to helping me express my story. And together, we created my now critically acclaimed one-woman show, Burq Off, which leads me to the final stage, finding a public platform for your story. For me, it was a one-woman show, and then it became an award-winning web series, and now it's a TED Talk, and it will continue to evolve. But what could it be for you? And yes, this is totally scary. I have faced resistance and criticism and judgment all while performing my show, but I kept on going because my team of creative partners were cheering me along the whole way. And as a result, Burq Off has now inspired men and women all over the world to take off their metaphorical burqas and reveal parts of themselves that they had kept hidden. By sharing my story again and again and now again, when all of my contradictions from my past became present, I was able to finally stand in my own truth and to own my cultural paradox. I learned that who I am is not fixed. It's fluid. And we can only begin to understand individuals and communities by accepting identity as a story, a movement that is constantly in flux. our stories matter. In places like Bushwick or Birmingham or Brussels that are so ethnically diverse, with old and new residents all at different stages of assimilation, it can be really tough to figure out your place and how you fit into the changing landscape. But when we share our stories publicly, we create nuance in the understanding of our global culture. And we need these stories, but especially from people and communities that aren't typically represented in the mainstream culture. We can transform our stories into important social dialogue that can help our communities move forward and become more compassionate towards one another. What would be possible in your communities, in your cities, in your countries, if you gave yourself the permission to speak freely about who you really are? We can spend our lives letting the world tell us who we are. Good Muslim, bad Westerner, old school Bushwick or developing urban metropolis, or we can decide for ourselves. And maybe then we can invent something better. Who am I? I am a constantly evolving human being. I am a story.